Hi, my name is Steven and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking to you about how to take notes, how to take effective notes in your life. Taking effective notes has been one of the greatest life hacks that I've used throughout my life. I have used it not only to keep track of everything that I need to do, but also to clear my headspace as well. When we put things down on paper or digitally, we offset the mental load that our brain has to carry for us. For simple or trivial things, you might not need to take notes for it. But if you have a lot of responsibilities or you're doing a lot in life, taking notes can be a saving grace. Note-taking is a powerful tool and you'll be better equipped to take on challenges and uncertainty in life. You can be more productive and efficient. So in today's video, I'm going to talk about how note-taking has changed my life and tips on taking effective notes. And before we start, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, share with your friends, hit that notification bell if you like this content. And here we go. So let's first talk about some of the background of note-taking. When I talk about note-taking, I simply mean writing down something that you'll need for the possible future. These can be Christmas lists, birthdays, or funny quotes. Anything that you really want to remember and that you'll have use for it in the future. And taking notes can be in any form you wish: pen and paper, writing in a journal, digital or electronic versions. In my previous video, I explained how I use Google Keep as my primary list and note-taking tool. I'll put a link down in the description box below so you can check it out. And also, I'm assuming that the notes you're taking is in an easily accessible location, so you can get to it whenever you want. So now let's talk about how note-taking has changed my life. Number 1, get rid of the clutter. My mind is usually filled with all sorts of things, thoughts, ideas, and things that I want to do for the future. Many times when I'm trying to focus on something in the present, I think about the past or the future. By writing it down, I can effectively let it go and just focus on the present at hand. I can clear those other thoughts because once I write it down on paper, I can look at it and then I can move on from it. When it's in my brain, it's hard to dislodge it without completing that entire thought. And sometimes that can take a long time depending on how complex that thought is. So writing it down is a great way for me to get rid of the clutter in my head. So there's usually two things that happens with the thoughts in your head. You either forget about that thought immediately when something else comes up, or you ruminate and obsess about it completely over and over. Either way, it taxes the mind and it's much more efficient to get it out on paper so that you don't have to put it in your brain. And the other thing that happens when you put it down on paper is that you won't forget about it. You'll have a copy of it to keep forever. Your mind can only handle so much information at one time. By writing it down, you're getting rid of the clutter in your mind and you can focus on whatever is present in your life. Number 2, seeing it live. When I write something down, something magical happens. It becomes real. I mean, a thought is real, but seeing it on paper is just something else entirely. You can actually connect with the words and you can actually build upon what you wrote down. When you have a thought, it's very hard to connect to another thought and build something complex in your brain. By writing it down on paper, it's much more easier to focus on different parts and connect them all together. When I try to solve a problem or plan something complex, I think about all the possibilities of it. When I put it down on paper, it becomes real and it becomes clear for me. I no longer have to think about all the possibilities swirling in my head. It's all down on paper and I don't have to think about it endlessly. Seeing something is very powerful. It goes from fantasy to reality and you can work with something that you can see. For example, if you want to start a business and you have all these things you want to do and you keep it all in your head, it's not going to be clear for you. It's going to be very hard for you to execute on certain things. Things like marketing, getting a loan, and even getting a physical space, all those tasks associated with those things can be a lot easier when you see it down on paper. When you write something down, it becomes real and you can take action on it, and you free up your mind so you can focus on just taking action. And number 3, a second brain. When I take effective notes, I'm able to double my brain's capacity. I'm able to remember random pieces of information or key important pieces of information. As a prolific note taker, I can recall information that I wouldn't otherwise if I just try to remember it in my brain. Because the notes that I take can be stored forever and it'd be exactly word for word of what I wrote down in the first place. So there's no issue of me forgetting about it or recalling things differently. I jot down everything that I think I need and won't have the space to store my brain for. For example, certain things that I need to get done, interesting links that I have, or things for my business. Those are the things that I don't necessarily need to actually have them memorized. I can just put them down on paper and recall it later. Note-taking has really helped me with the little stuff. It's like I have a second brain to help me recall and retain information that I wouldn't otherwise remember. So here are some of my tips on taking effective notes. Number 1, use established tools. When you're taking notes for the first time, don't try to reinvent the wheel. Use tools that others have used before. When you start taking notes for the first time, or you're ramping up the amount of notes you're taking, it can be really complex to try to classify and organize everything at the same time. And it can easily overwhelm people that aren't used to taking notes all the time. So when you first start out, use established tools that are familiar to you and stick with them. So for example, if you're already using Evernote to record music or speech, use that tool to record your notes as well. Or if you're using Google Keep as a primary way to make lists, expand it to note-taking abilities as well. So if you're starting out in the beginning, stick to something that you're familiar with so that it helps you to take notes more easily. Number 2, make it a habit. For note-taking to be effective, try to do it on a daily basis. Because if you don't take notes regularly, you won't use that tool effectively. Because you'll default to taking notes whenever you think about it. And that's no good because the purpose of taking notes is to help your brain remember things. So I make it a habit to write something down as frequently as possible, so I get myself into the habit of taking notes all the time. And once I write that down, I review it later and add and subtract to it as needed. So in the beginning, when you're building this habit, you can record down things that are interesting to you. So for example, a funny quote that you heard, a website that you like, or something that you want to buy. Just note it down. And so in the future, it'll be easier and more habitual for you. So you'll be able to take down more and more complex notes as you go along. Number 3, write down everything. In general, when I'm taking notes, I write down everything that I possibly can. And this is because I want to recall as much as I can about what was being said during that time. For things that are electronic based, I might not only copy the paragraph text, I might copy the link that I found it from as well. The point is to try to grab as much information and/or context of that as possible. So when you go back and review it at a later date, you'll completely understand why you think that it was important in the first place to write it down. Because context is king, and we often miss important things if we try to shorten it or paraphrase something. When we take down notes, we tend to be lazy and filter things through our own lens, missing what possibly could have been actually said. Either way, things can get lost in translation and we lose the context of that important information. So when we write everything down, it may not make sense to us in the present, but when we review it at a later date, it might become crystal clear. So when in doubt, try to record and write down as much as you can about whatever you're note-taking on. Number 4, make it accessible. To use your notes effectively, make sure you have quick access to them. By removing as many barriers as you can between you and your notes, you can make sure that you can maintain note-taking and review them quickly on a daily basis. For example, in Google Keep, I keep a running list of all the things that I need to do and review them on a daily basis. I have really quick access to them. It's really quick and easy for me to take a look at what I need to do and to make simple and quick notes. And it's easier for me to remind myself what do I need to do instead of it being buried somewhere and I need to dig it up. If you don't have something digital or electronic, you can just keep a simple notepad next to you at all times. And so you can review and jot down stuff and you can get quick access to it. Like they say, out of sight, out of mind. If you don't keep your notes close to you, you won't use them effectively. Number 5, review as needed. Always review your notes at a later date. There's no point in writing down notes if you don't look at them later. So the goal is to organize your notes so that it can help you at a later date. Sometimes when we jot down something that's a good idea, when we review it later, it might not be such a good idea. So for example, when I was younger, I would have lots of business ideas. But then when I reviewed that list later, some were good and some were really bad. So when you take down notes, always review it maybe a week later, and then prune out the things that you might not want to keep. This way you can condense all the notes that you've taken and only keep those that will help you in the future. So filter your notes through the review. Keep the good ones, eliminate the bad ones, and you'll organize your notes so that it'll be more effective for you in the future. So those are my tips on how to take effective notes. I've used this critical skill in helping me to become a better student, engineer, and business owner. It has helped me keep track of tedious, difficult, and complex things with ease. I no longer have to store it in my brain. I can put it down on paper and it becomes real for me, a problem that can be solved with actions. It has helped me to offload my mental resources, so I don't have to keep it in my brain. I can come back to it at a later date and it'll be word for word correct. And so the basis of effective note-taking is to make it as easy as possible for you to take notes, write as much as you can down, and also review as needed at a later date. And once you make it into a habit, you'll realize the awesome power of this tool to free your mind and focus on other things in life. So thank you for watching. Please leave me a comment down below on whether or not you take notes and what advice would you offer. And I'll see you next time.